Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'd also like to thank Kimberly with Windsor Arts for reaching out to us here at the Heritage Glass Museum for this opportunity. It's wonderful to be here visiting with you. Yeah, I'm Mike Benson, and I'm a volunteer here at the Heritage Glass Museum. We're actually located in Glassboro, New Jersey, and I actually serve as the president of the museum. I've been with the museum for about 6 years. I became interested in Southern New Jersey glass history through my work at Rowan, where I develop and curate a variety of projects, including Rowan's Public Art Project, Rowan University's Arboretum, with my colleague, Dr. Sarah Wright, and also the Glassboro Memory Mapping Project, which I created with my colleague, Dr. Jen Kitson. And through this project, it actually introduced me to our glass history in our area, and frankly, the community where I had been living for about 20 years. These kinds of experiences, at least for me, increased my curiosity about my own backyard, which led me to the Heritage Glass Museum, which is a small volunteer-led museum with many individuals who have volunteered for the museum for between 30 and 40 years. There's several people that have volunteered with us for 30 to 40 years. And because of these folks, I became curious about the museum and why it was so special for them to volunteer for so long. So today we're going to do a walking tour of the Heritage Glass Museum. We're going to learn about why our museum is special, at least to us. We will explore the history of Southern New Jersey glass through our artifacts, which include our historical bottles, our glass artifacts and tools, and some photos. You will learn about early glassmaking and see hand-blown, pressed, and scientific glass artifacts. You'll also learn about the museum's history and mission and how we help preserve and share Southern New Jersey's glassmaking with our community. My objective here is to introduce you to our museum and to touch on the scope of Southern New Jersey's glassmaking history and the beauty and craftsmanship of our glass artifacts. And through this, I hope that you will develop a more personal connection with South Jersey and our glass heritage, and also the people who created it. I also hope to inspire you to become involved in saving our glass heritage through visiting our museum, possibly becoming a member, or maybe doing your own research or teaching about glass history, all of which helps us preserve our glassmaking heritage and artifacts and teach others about their beauty and their importance. I also hope that you too will come to recognize that the Heritage Glass Museum is also a special place. Tell you a little bit about the museum. The museum was founded in 1979 by a committed group of teachers, collectors, average folks interested in our history and antique glass. From the beginning, we have had an educational focus. Our mission is to collect, preserve, and curate historic Southern New Jersey glass, that's both historic and fine art glass, and also artifacts related to glassmaking, and photos and documents in order to inspire audiences to explore our rich heritage in glassmaking. So far, over the last 45 years, we've saved approximately 2,400 artifacts and countless photos, documents, and we've even recorded some oral histories. So our museum is located in Glassboro, right where this map pin is at. One of the things that makes our museum special is that we have been a free museum since our founding in 1979. We're supported by memberships and donations, and of course, our volunteers who keep the doors open and help to process and care for all the artifacts, the museum, and frankly, while doing all this work, each other, because it's a lot of work. The Borough of Glassboro and also our neighbors, the Glassboro Fire Department, also pitch in with general maintenance of the building and also the grounds. From the beginning of the museum, it has been 100% managed by volunteers, and 100% of the funds that we raise go right back into the museum. We've never had a paid staff member um, in the museum. Um, During our 45-year history, in addition to saving New Jersey artifacts, artwork, and documents and photographs, we've also worked to provide unique learning experiences to the community and research support to students and professional researchers. We have also curated numerous public exhibits, recorded oral histories, and collected publications related to Southern New Jersey's glassmaking. Our goal remains to preserve our history for future generations and make it easily accessible for our visitors. This has always included free access to the museum, providing a wholesome learning experience for families and students. So we're housed in an old bank, which still has many of the original features, including our large windows, which, as it turns out, is perfect for displaying glass. And you're going to see some of that here in this walking tour. The building was built in 1925 for the former Glassboro Title and Trust Company. Unfortunately, the bank didn't survive long. It closed in 1931 as a consequence of improper loans to its two directors and also the effects of the Great Depression. The building sat vacant for a bit, and then during World War II, it was stocked as an auxiliary hospital, and thankfully, it was never used for that purpose. The structure and the land was then used for a lumber yard, and then for many years as Glassboro's public library. Our former president, Darla Cassidy, actually worked as a librarian assistant in the building, and many of our townspeople still have wonderful memories visiting the library back in the 60s and early 70s. We actually still have some of the original furniture from the library. In the late 1960s and through the 1970s, the downtown area of Glassboro fell into basically bad times. The area had many vacant shops, and it also had high crime in this general area right here. Our founders, especially a local teacher, Mrs. Marilyn Plaskett, explored how to revitalize the downtown, and they worked to create the museum as a new attraction to bring pride to the community. So Marilyn Plaskett was the driving force behind the founding of the Heritage Glass Museum. Marilyn became interested in glass and South Jersey's history at a very young age. Her grandfathers worked as glassblowers at the Whitney Glass Works, which was located at the very same location of our museum. She started as a young girl, starting as a young girl, she recognized the importance and value of her family's history, and she started collecting glass and pretty much everything Glassboro. And over the years, she developed a very large collection. After high school, she attended Glassboro State College and then became an art teacher right here in Glassboro. After many years of teaching, she went back to school and completed a master's in history, which included writing a thesis on the history of the Whitney Glassworks, which we'll talk about a little bit later. About 20% of our glass collection came from Marilyn's collection, but she also inspired many others in the local community and South Jersey community to donate pieces to the museum. Our collection mostly focuses on Southern New Jersey, but we have some artifacts from Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. We have an eclectic collection of highly collectible bottles, jars, decorative glasswares, paperweights, scientific glass, molds, and tools. We also have original script currency from a couple of the glass factories and photos of early buildings and workers that include young children. We also have historical documents, financial ledgers, historical advertisements, and even a photograph of President Taft visiting Glassboro. Like I said earlier, we have saved approximately 2,400 artifacts over the last 45 years. We also have a library that includes a fairly good collection of books. We have catalogs, we have newsletters, and other documents related to Southern New Jersey glass and its history. In a few minutes, we'll explore the museum so that you can see our space and some of our artifacts. But first, I think it's important to share some of the history of glassmaking with you so that you'll have a slightly better understanding. So let's start at the beginning. The first attempts to create glass in the New World and the colonies took place in Jamestown, Virginia. However, those attempts didn't last long. During the 1600s and early 1700s, glass in the colonies was primarily imported from England. The crown had a tight hold on the industry because it brought significant revenue, not just through selling glass, but also through taxes. The colonists were not allowed to make glass, but there were a few hardy folks who rebelled against the British and tried to create glass factories. For example, there were a couple short-lived ventures in Massachusetts and also New Amsterdam, but those also did not last long. The first truly successful glass factory, and arguably the first industrial factory in the colonies, was created by Caspar Wistar of Philadelphia. Wistar was a German immigrant who first worked as a soap maker, then started to purchase land. He then became a brass button maker and became very wealthy, and he recognized the opportunity to create glass in the colonies and started to explore setting up a factory. So Caspar Wistar's story is the quintessential American immigration story. He came to the colonies from Germany with almost nothing at all that he brought with him. And through hard work and ingenuity, he became one of the largest landowners in the colonies. He also became a very successful businessman in multiple industries. In 1738, 1739, right around that time period, Wistar partnered with 4 German glassmakers to create the United Glass Company north of Salem, New Jersey. It was the first successful glass factory in the colonies. They created window glass, bottles, and blown glass shapes used for multiple purposes. They also created glass for Benjamin Franklin for his experiments. And some of this glass can be seen in the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. The village of Worcesterburg developed around the factory, and United Glass Company is often called Worcesterburg Glass Works. And you will see often that United Glass Company is listed as Worcesterburg Glass Factory in the literature. And also if you go to museums, you'll see it listed as Worcesterburg Glass Works, but it's really United Glass Company. Caspar Wistar was innovative and was a modern thinker in terms of business. He shared the profits with his German glassmakers, and Wistar's biggest challenge was to obtain skilled workers. So he advertised in Germany to encourage glassmakers to come to the New Jersey colony to work for him. Caspar Wistar and then his son, Richard Wistar, paid for the family to travel, and they also provided housing for them to live in New Jersey. So one of these families was the Stanger family. Stanger is also spelled Stenger. You'll see it spelled that way pretty often in the literature. Jacob and Catherine Stanger owned a successful factory in Dorhagen, Germany, but the political situation was unstable and they decided to leave. They were not permitted to sell their factory, so they had to abandon it in order to come to the New World. Jacob and Catherine had 7 sons and 1 daughter, and they immigrated through Philadelphia in 1768 on board a ship named the Betsy. Jacob and his older sons immediately began working in the Wistar factory as glassblowers. Jacob and Catherine's 2 youngest sons started as apprentices and learned the trade at United Glass. Wistar's factory was the first successful glass factory in the New World. It was also likely the first industrial factory in the colonies. Glassmaking was America's first industry. It's considered its first industry, and it started here in southern New Jersey. So due to several issues, the factory did have difficulty obtaining supplies and, of course, labor. And then in 1752, Caspar Wistar died and his son Richard took over. Richard was also very successful. However, the Revolutionary War caused a downturn in business, and the factory started to have increasing difficulty with the size of the orders, transporting orders, getting supplies, and of course, the scarcity of labor. And here's an example of a United Glass Company piece. Eventually, the Stanger family decided to leave United Glass and started their own factory. Their son, Solomon Stanger, purchased approximately 200 acres of land, which is now part of Glassboro, New Jersey, to create a new homestead. The family built a small log cabin and then a larger home and an inn. They also built their factory off what is now State Street. In 1781, Richard Wister died and United Glass ended up closing, which created opportunities for other glass ventures such as the Stanger Glassworks. So this is the location of where the Stanger homestead was at. And then you also have the site of the factory, which is right in this open area behind these homes. So one of the questions that we get asked quite often is, why did they choose Southern New Jersey to make glass? The answer to this question, to find the answer for this, let me rephrase this. To answer this question, we first need to recognize that the demand for glass was increasing within the colonies. This was before the Revolutionary War and then again after the Revolutionary War. The second reason was the location. Southern Jersey was centrally located and provided fairly easy access to Philadelphia and other growing communities. The location was also isolated. They were rebelling against the British because of the laws and the taxes, so they wanted to stay hidden. This was before the Revolutionary War. Southern New Jersey allowed them to hide their factory in the woods. This area also had a very small population, and there were very few roads that went through the area. Southern New Jersey also provided access to raw materials, such as hardwood, such as various oak trees and black oak or black walnut trees. There was also clay in the area, and access to minerals, and of course, access to water. Whenever you're creating glass, you need to be close to water in order to put fires out, because it was very much used fire to melt the glass. They also needed to be fairly close to water to transport the glass down the rivers, down the Delaware River. So I want to show you a display. So I'm going to actually need to move the camera. So it's going to jiggle around just a little bit. Okay. I'm going to put my hand over the camera so you don't get dizzy. And I'm going to show you parts of the museum. Hopefully you can see this. So this right here is a display of some of the materials. So we have cobalt. It's a little bit dark. So we have cobalt. We have copper oxide, salt cake, and different kinds of sands. One of the reasons why they chose South Jersey was because of very fine sand. So what they would do is they would melt all this material into a pot very similar to this pot right down here. Okay. And they would take a blow tool. I'm not going to pick up a blow tool because the tools have material on it that you actually don't want to touch. Give me 1 second here. So I have a wooden stick here. And what they would do is they would melt the glass into these types of pots. They would dip the glass or dip the pipe into the glass, pick up a ball of glass, and then they would carry it over to a mold. They would carry it over to a mold and put it into a mold and then blow inside the mold to create the form. And that's how they would create the glass. Of course, back then, they didn't have metal. They would just blow, in the early times, they would just blow free form and then just form it by moving the glass left and right, and then just shaping it. So these bottles were literally created. I'm going to move one more time. These bottles were literally created through the breath and hands of these workers. Okay. And this is one of those bottles. And we're going to talk a little bit about this bottle here in just a minute. Okay, so here's the Stanger's house right here. Their house and glassworks, a rendition of it. So during the Revolutionary War, the currency was revalued, which sadly bankrupt the Stanger Glassworks. The Stanger family was forced to sell the business to Colonel Thomas Huston and Colonel Thomas Carpenter, who both served under George Washington. Um, uh, Heston and Carpenter then hired the Stangers to work in their newly formed Heston Carpenter Glassworks. This was the same factory that the Stangers had created. Heston and Carpenter managed different aspects of the business. Thomas Heston managed the inn and the glassworks, and he lived in Glassboro. Carpenter managed the transportation of the glassware, and he lived about 7 miles away in an area called Carpenter's Landing, which is now Mantua. Okay, so this bottle right here, the Heston bottle, is an example of one that was created by the Heston Carpenter Glassworks. Here's another one right here, this small glass bottle right here. Sorry for the jiggling. Okay. Here's another one. We're only aware of 5 of these glass bottles that are in existence. And they're exceedingly rare and very valuable. So I'm going to pull back just a little bit. In 1802, Thomas Heston died, and when he was only 44 years old. His wife Hannah took over the business, and she ran the inn and the glassworks for about 20 years while also raising her 9 children. Hannah ran the factory longer than her husband, and she was successful, but she doesn't actually get much attention in history, but we're trying to change that here at the Heritage Glass Museum. Eventually, the Heston Carpenter Glassworks was sold and became the Olive Glassworks, using the same factory that the Stangers built. Eventually, Olive Glassworks was sold, forming the Harmony Glassworks, and this company decided to create a new, more modern facility, so they moved to the block that the museum actually sits on now. The Whitney brothers, I'm going to move one more time. The Whitney brothers, Thomas and Samuel Whitney, worked for Harmony, and then they eventually purchased the company in 1839. They then changed the name to Whitney Brothers, and eventually the company became the largest glassmaker in the country for a period of time. So I'd like to show you a lithograph of the Whitney Glassworks. It depicts the size of the company, showing multiple kilns. It also shows the smoke coming out of the smokestacks. Ooh, I don't know if you can see that. Can you guys see that? Basically, it shows multiple kilns, and you can see the smoke coming out of the smokestacks. And it was a rather large factory for that time. They produce a wide variety of fruit jars, bottles, inks, and many glass products. They fulfilled million-piece orders that were all hand-blown. In 1885, they received their largest order for 7.5 million bottles of a product called Warner's Safe Cure for the H.H. Warner Company. That's 7.5 million hand-blown bottles. They did use molds, but all the pieces were basically hand-created and hand-blown. So the most famous bottle that came out of the Whitney Brothers Glassworks is the booze bottle. And I'm going to show you the actual bottle. Pardon me while I move. You also have to forgive me for the lighting. The lighting might not be perfect. Oh, there we go. It's not too bad. Oh, it's backwards. Okay. Well, it's actually flipped. I should have flipped it. Sorry about that. But this is an example of a real authentic booze bottle. Um, this particular bottle is in exceptional quality. It's there's no cracks in it. There's no chips in the bottle. It's actually almost perfect quality. Our bottle is actually a better bottle than what the Philadelphia Museum of Art has. Um, there's also over to the right here, um, to the left actually, there's actually a Whitney glass home. These are homes that the Whitney glass factory used to basically they rented them to their workers. So let me go back to the bottle. This particular bottle is highly collectible. We also use it as our museum logo. The bottle was created by the Whitneys for the E.G. Booze Whiskey Company in 1860. The owner was Edward G. Booze, and that was his real name. And the word booze was earlier attributed to alcohol. However, these bottles likely helped popularize the term booze. E.G. Booze and Whitney were business neighbors on Walnut Street in Philadelphia, where they both had showrooms for their products. Booze hired the Whitneys to create a unique bottle for his whiskey, and they decided on the shape of the Whitney glassworkers' homes for their bottle. I like to say that this bottle is one of the earliest examples of using packaging design to create branding. When back in the day, when people saw this bottle, they knew it was immediately, it was E.G. Booze whiskey. Okay, so here's Samuel Whitney. So the Whitneys created other designs as bottle brands, and I'm going to show you a few more. Forgive me while I move the camera. So here are some more designs. Notice the shapes. So here you have a Native American Indian. You also have a corn bottle. You also have Jenny Lind bottles, which are right here. These are Jenny Lind bottles. Jenny Lind was an opera singer from France, and she was very famous. And they put her image on this spirits bottle to basically sell more of their product. The Whitneys also created mason jars. Just going to roll down. Sorry about the reflection. They created a wide variety of bottles. They also created mason jars. So the first mason jars were created right here in Glassboro by the Whitneys. I'd like to also point out that most of this work was created with the help of child laborers as young as 10 years old. Let me show you a picture of child laborers. So here's a photo within the museum of some of the children that actually worked in the museum, actually worked in the Whitney factory. I also like to point out that these factories were dirty, smoky, hot, and dangerous places to work. The people who worked in these factories were also paid with script currency, also known as company money. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about script currency because I have to move one more time because script or company money tells an important part of the story of glass and how it's connected to our collective story. So I need to walk over here, show you actual script currency. This is Whitney script currency. And I apologize, I should have flipped the camera, but you kind of get the idea. The Whitney, like many manufacturers of the era, paid the workers with script currency. The workers could only spend this money, their pay, at the company store or to pay rent for one of the company homes, the type of home that we just looked at that inspired the booze bottle. Company money forced workers to keep working for the company since you could not spend the money anywhere else, and a lot of these workers were children. So the story of glassmaking is also the story of the rise of labor unions and also changes in child labor laws. So let me move one more time. Actually, I don't have to move for this one. This particular picture this is one of the photos that we have in the museum, which is the Whitney store, the Whitney building and the Whitney store. The building was across the street from the Whitney factory, and for a time, it was the center of town. During the time this photo was taken, the structure included the Whitney Company store on the left, just behind the telephone pole. And on the right were various businesses. The building also had rooms for social clubs, like the Oddfellows group and other ones like that. It also included Glassboro's first municipal building. Sadly, after almost 70 years of use, the structure burnt down in 1944. When we have an oral history of a local man named George Armstrong, where he shares his experience watching the fire, watching the building burn down, unfortunately. So as time progressed, so did our technologies. And as with everything, change was inevitable. And at the height of the Industrial Revolution, a supervisor at a factory in Ohio, Toledo, Ohio factory, named, the worker's name was Michael J. Owen, started to experiment with machinery. And he streamlined a process for creating glass light bulbs. In 1895, he then invented an automatic bottle machine, which disrupted the glass bottle industry. And a few years later, he created his own glass-making company, and then he merged that company to form Owen, Illinois' Glass Company, which together lowered cost and significantly increased production capacity, which again disrupted and transformed the glass industry. As a consequence, glass companies creating hand-blown glass couldn't compete and were put out of business, and eventually included the Whitney Glass Works. So in 1917, Owen, Illinois ended up purchasing the Whitney Glass Works. They then built a new factory on Soul Road, which is a short distance from here, using their automatic machines where they made glass until 1936. The factory made bottle caps till 1988. Unfortunately, industrial waste from both the Owen plant and a nearby Sony factory was dumped at a landfill in Pittman, New Jersey. The landfill is called Lipari Landfill. And that site became the largest and most toxic Superfund site in the United States. The actual waste flowed into a local lake, which then spread that toxic waste downstream. This caused a huge environmental disaster for the area. Plus, we also can't forget about that, with the Whitney factory, and there's actually other factories within Glassboro, all of that smoke that was being pumped into the air, and then all these factories were also dumping waste from their factories in various areas around Glassboro and Pittman and Clayton. Pretty much all South Jersey had this problem. It caused a huge environmental and health impact that affected the groundwater, and it caused decades of cleanup. Thankfully, the federal government helped to clean it up, and just recently, just last month, the EPA announced that they were removing the landfill site from their Superfund list. So the story of glass is also the story about our environment and how we care for it, both of which are important lessons that can be shared in our classrooms. So I'd like to transition to rediscovery of our artifacts and to celebrate the wide variety of forms and beauty in these bottles. Um, this is also the story of how this art form was created, literally from the breath and hands of our ancestors. So around the 1960s, folks started rediscovering our glass heritage that was literally buried under their feet. Folks researched dump sites and old privies and started to dig up antique bottles to collect and then to resell. After all, some of these bottles can be valued in the thousands and sometimes multiple thousands. If you're curious, go to YouTube and search bottle digging, and you'll find a wide variety of videos introducing you to bottle finding. It's fascinating to see the process and see what they literally dig up under their feet. Also, during this time, we had glass companies that start. I'm sorry, these are actually some of the bottles that were dug up that were donated to the museum. Again, I apologize for the camera being backwards. Okay, so we have a small collection of those. Also during the 1960s, we had glass companies that started to make collectibles, such as the Wheaton line of presidential bottles. So I'm going to show you some of the presidential bottles. So these are them right here. So they have a president on each one of these bottles. Um, Whedon also created many glass banks and many decorative pieces. Another company called Anchor Hawking that was located in Salem also had collectibles that they created and sold, and these are some of them. Anchor Hawking also created bottles for local high schools where they could sell and make money on selling their bottles. Okay, so let me go. I'm going to move one more time. I'm going to cover this up so you don't get dizzy. Okay, so were also numerous companies that made novelty and branded bottles like these. So these are novelty flasks that were created partially for the fun of it. Like here's a pretzel that was a flask. It's actually a mix of ceramic and glass. You have one that's shaped like a turkey leg. Let me see if I can get past that glare. There's one that's shaped like a turkey leg. You have another one over here that's shaped like a fish. Okay. These bottles, these flasks were created partially to hide drinking, but they're also made just for the fun of it. Down here, we also have a wide variety of different types of branded flasks. Some of them have images on it. Some of them, the branding, the shape. Here's one that's in the shape of a hand. There's another one that's shaped in the shape of a pistol. And you have a wide variety of different shapes. You have milk bottles and other types of bottles down here. Okay. Over here, we have a decorative collection of uranium glass. Yeah, I said uranium. So these pieces were actually made with a little bit of uranium, and they actually glow in the dark. Not glow in the dark, but whenever you put a black light on them, which I have a black light on right now, it actually glows. It creates this glow. There were two types of uranium glass. I mean, let me rewind a little bit. First off, they were made with uranium, but the literature and numerous tests show that even though they were a bit radioactive, they were not harmful. But with that said, I would not collect these bottles, these kinds of materials, and I wouldn't serve my guests with them because they did have uranium in them. But a lot of people collect this type of glassware. A lot of people do. So when the bottles are lit with black light, uranium glass glows with a bright green, and Vaseline glass glows in a yellow. So this plate right here is a Vaseline glass, and this one right over here is a uranium glass. Okay. This type of glass was mass produced, and you can find it at almost any antique store. Okay, let's keep moving. Another absolutely beautiful form of glass that was very popular in South Jersey were paperweights. South Jersey has a wonderful tradition of creating glass paperweights. Glassmakers created paperweights as decorative items. They were also used for advertising, sort of like how a restaurant will give us a calendar or a pen. It was done in the same way. South Jersey is particularly famous for the Millville Rose. That's a Millville Rose. Um, and then also, South Jersey is famous because of an artist named Paul Stankard, who was an internationally famous paperweight artist. I'm going to move one more time. Let me cover that so you don't get dizzy. Sorry for moving around. The pieces are in different areas of the museum. Okay. All right. So Paul creates these, as I said, Paul Stankard is an internationally famous paperweight artist. And this is one of his pieces right here. Paul creates these amazingly beautiful sculptural paperweights. Paul actually lives in our area and he's a member of the museum. So here's one of his pieces. Here's one of his earlier pieces. And here's another one. If you're able to come in and see these in person, I highly recommend it. They're absolutely beautiful and just amazing how clear they are and the fine detail that he's able to create. So Paul currently has an exhibit at Camden County College. And if you would like to go, I think that the show is ending soon. So check online if you want to go and see some of his work in person, more of his work in person. But you can also come here, of course, because we have 3 of his pieces. Okay. So since we're on this side of the museum, I wanted to show you work created by the Clevenger brothers. They're actually from Clayton. Let me move over here. Okay. So these pieces here in the window were created by Clevenger brothers. Clevenger was founded in 1930 during the Great Depression. The family struggled to find work, so they decided to explore what they could make and sell. They decided on glass and learned the trade on their own and created glass as they went. They focused on producing affordable reproductions of early glass. They also used molds. Let me show you an example. I'm going to cover this one more time. So here's a Clevenger bottle, the Clevenger mold. And that would fit right inside there. Actually, I had that backwards. I think I did. So no, I had it. So it would fit right in there, and then it would basically they would close this. It's really heavy. I can't move it. It's too heavy. So they would close it, and then they would blow from the top, and then the air would expand it into the mold, creating the patterns. The patterns are right in here. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. So Clevenger made a lot of pieces, and they created a lot of work and were fairly successful. Here are some other photos of them working in their factory. Okay. So the factory, the actual building, it's actually still there, but they stopped using it. I think it was in the early 90s. They stopped using it. They shut down. But the factory is still there. If you come to the Glassboro Clayton area and you take out your map on your phone and just search for Clevenger Brothers, you can actually go and stand in front of the factory. Unfortunately, it is falling down. Eventually, they are going to need to knock the whole building down. It's fenced in, but you can go there and you can actually see the actual factory from a distance. It's actually really fascinating how much work they created in a small space that they have. Okay, so because of technology and changes in the market, and more glass factories closed, leaving glass workers without jobs. Uh, these were highly skilled craftsmen, and many of them didn't want to give up their backyard factories. They created a wide variety of work in their backyards. So here's some of them. Again, the glass is going to be a problem. So there's some right here. Oh, here's some other ones. So these cabinets include the work by these artists, and these pieces show the skill of these glassmakers. It's important to note that they sold these works to fund their lives. It was their livelihood. These pieces literally put roofs over their head and food on their tables. And some of these pieces are absolutely like striking. They're super beautiful. Really beautiful work. So Southern New Jersey also became well known for its scientific glass. One of the best known scientific glass makers in the country is Chem Glass Life Science, which still operates today in Millville, New Jersey. And actually, Chem Glass is a very large company. It's one of the largest employers in Millville. So they make pieces similar to this, used for chemistry, used for medicine, used for research. They also make models. So here's an example of a model for, I think this is a model for an industrial, for some industrial purpose. I'm not really sure why. So you can come and take a look at some of our scientific glass. Most of these works are handmade blown pieces. There's actually a community college in Salem County Community College, that they still teach how to become a scientific glass blower, and it's highly skilled, fairly sought after work actually. Or let me rephrase that. They're constantly looking for more workers. What I'm trying to say. Another form of glass making, flame work, is really about transforming glass, such as using glass rods to make sculptural pieces such as these. So you have like this little squirrel here, you have a dolphin, these little sculptural pieces, then you have wishing wells. I'm sure you've seen these in different stores being sold. You have blown swans. Down here, you have a really beautiful deer. I don't know if you can see that. Deer is absolutely beautiful. And there's some other multicolored pieces. We have a little collection of alligators, which are pretty cool. And then some older collection. Here's some old flasks. These are actual flasks, similar to the ones that I showed you a little bit ago, the novelty flasks. They can also make jewelry from flame work. Before we finish up, I'd like to show you our cabinet that features some of Marilyn Plaskett's collection and also her thesis. Again, Marilyn is our founder. So these are some of the pieces that we have out right now that are works that she donated. These are some of these pieces are she actually purchased when she was a young girl. And here's some other ones. There's a couple canes down here. Glass makers, in between making orders for commercial glass, they would practice to keep their skills up. So they would make things like glass canes. They would also make little hammers and things like that. Little pencil holder right there. Okay. Um, I'd also like to mention that we also have a section that honors one of our trustees, Gene Costal, who was a longtime trustee and friend. And Gene he was actually quite an accomplished man. In addition to serving in World War II, Gene was a county commissioner and also served as mayor of Clayton. He loved South Jersey, and like Maryland, Gene loved the museum and believed in our educational focus. And with that, I'd like to point out that through glass, you can teach all these subjects and more. For example, you can use glass to teach colonial and US history, New Jersey history, the Industrial Revolution. You can use glass to talk about indentured servitude, child labor, and also fair labor practices in labor unions. You can use it to talk about, to teach economics. And we use it at Rowan in our cultural and urban geography classes or in our geology classes. We have also used it in our branding and packaging design classes and also in fine art. You can also use our library and our museum to teach with primary resources. And if you're interested, let me know and we can talk about how you might be able to integrate, if you're a teacher or know a teacher, how they might be able to integrate glass into their courses. So some key points that I'd like for you to focus on, to think about our glassmaking heritage is that glassmaking was America's first industry, and the making of glass supported the lives of our ancestors and built the foundation of our communities. The story of glass is our collective story. It's the story of labor unions and labor laws that put a stop to unfair practices and even child labor. It's a story about our environment and how we cared for it, and in many cases didn't care for it. And glass is also beautiful. It's also a beautiful and expressive art form created literally from the breath and hands of our ancestors. And that glass connects us to our past and our future. As we come to the end of our presentation, I'd like to point out that we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our memberships and donations are tax deductible. We are run by volunteers. We have a volunteer staff, no paid staff at all. 100% of the funds that we raise go right back into the museum, caring for our pieces, doing educational programming, things like that. Right now, we're only open on Saturdays from 11 to 2. But if you want to come on a Saturday, please do check our website because we are a small organization, and sometimes we're not able to find one of our volunteers can't work on a Saturday, so we end up closing. So please do check our website to make sure that we're open for the Saturday that you want to come. Overall, I hope I did a good job introducing you to our museum and the scope of Southern New Jersey's glassmaking history and the beauty and craftsmanship of our glass artifacts. And through this, I hope that you develop a more personal connection with South Jersey's glass and our glass heritage and the people who created it. I also hope that I inspired you to visit our museum, maybe think about becoming a member, and maybe even doing your own research or teaching a class about glass history. All of this helps us preserve our glassmaking heritage and artifacts, and I hope that you too have come to recognize the Heritage Glass Museum as special. So thank you very much for giving me this